Cool. So yes, welcome to the AI argument. AI argument. This is what is this? Number three? Is this our third? Is this our third?
Episode 3, as long as our
Excellent.
robot overlords allowed us to continue.
If we were ever worried that we might not have enough material to talk about, then we were completely and utterly misguided, and we are swamped with AI developments again this week. It's incredible. Like even just
Frank,
choosing what to pick out this week.
I grew up in Dublin, right, in the 80s. And the technological advancement that happened between 1980 and 1989 was that I stopped being the remote control and we got a TV that actually had a remote control.
Yeah.
And my uncle went to America and came back with a cordless phone, which just blew us away. That was in 10 years. That was a whole decade of technological advancement. And in this week, we have our robot overlords have been demonstrated to us. Software developers have been consigned to the rubbish bin. And the largest object to enter space from Earth since the moon was sent up was launched by SpaceX. What a week! This is what I'm talking about. This is brilliant. This is exactly what I want. This is what I'm talking about. And we're only getting going. It's only March. Happy Pi Day yesterday to everybody.
And so meanwhile, then I'm delighted because I woke up this morning and I saw an update from Barry Scannell on LinkedIn saying that the EU Commission were requesting information from a lot of the big companies about what would the impact be of generative AI and what the risks were and how this was going to impact on elections. So I'm also glad to see that not only, I am excited about the developments. I'm not going to lie, I absolutely am. But I'm also very glad to see that some regulatory stuff is kicking in and that some responsibility is being pushed onto these companies in terms of what they're up to.
Do you know what it is, Frank? Total waste of time and effort, right? I can hear all those developers who are left with the job leaving the EU and going to America as we speak. What the European Union should be doing is they should be using AI to impose regulation, not putting regulation on AI. So, we've got we had a banking crisis here about 10 years ago. And the banks, were taking the mick. Can you imagine, right? You've got Google Gemini. It's got a context window of 1.5 million tokens. I could take every banking regulation. I could take a bank's books. I could take every financial report, and I could just throw them into that context window, and I could regulate every bank in about half an hour. That's what the European Union should be doing. I mean, instead of it seems to me there's a difference between Europe and America, where in America everything is allowed until it's not allowed. And in Europe, everything is not allowed until it is allowed. And this is a new frontier. This is we're breaking new ground. So we talked about this. It should be whack-a-mole, right? The way the Americans are doing it is correct. You allow it to develop, and when you see something you don't like, then you stop it, rather than killing innovation by saying, well, this is what you're not allowed to do, and this is what you are allowed to do.
Do you not think, though? I mean, surely a lot of these same conversations probably arose when the EU were bringing in GDPR. And now we are finally kind of seeing very slowly the rest of the world kind of follow suit and have similar privacy laws and regulations. I think this could be similar. I think we could be leading the way here in terms of a little bit of foresight and a little bit of like, hang on a second. I mean, we talked on a previous episode of the AI argument about how the damage that social media has been doing and some of the damage it's been doing to young people, and that it's all because everybody just kind of went, yeah, we don't really know what's going on with the algorithms. Just leave them off. It'll all be fine. It'll be grand. It's just social media. And I would hate for the same thing to happen with AI, where we just go, yeah, it's very complicated. Just let the companies sort it out. We'll be grand.
Frank, I have blisters on my index finger from pressing allow cookies. That's what GDPR did. that's all that GDPR did as far as I'm concerned. Every website I have to go to, I've got to click on allow cookies. It is the most annoying pop-up I've ever seen in my entire life.
Okay, but that is not the sum total of GDPR. So I mean, as a marketer, I can say that it had a massive negative impact in terms of like we were able to do all kinds of cool stuff as marketers because there was no restriction on the data that we could access from social media platforms. As a marketer, I was kind of like, oh man, I don't have that ability anymore. But as a human being, I was like, this is a good thing. This is a good thing that I cannot go into social media and say, show this person this ad because they went to the bathroom 5 minutes ago.
But the interesting thing about the GDPR regulation was that it wasn't introduced in 1989. It was introduced, I think, in 2019, 2020, there and thereabouts, right? So that was after the advent of the internet, after the advent of social media. And so the technology was allowed to be developed. And then when, I actually do agree with you, right? That you should have, your data is your own. And so they allowed the problem to appear, and then they tackled the problem. They didn't try and tackle the problem before it appeared. So they're doing the regulation the wrong way around with AI. They need to, let the shackles off a bit at the start.
But will it not be too late? So, I mean, one of the things they're asking about is what the potential impact on the elections will be. So I know I'm in Mark Schaefer's Rise community, and Mark Schaefer was at South by Southwest, and he mentioned a company called, I think they were called Reality Defender.
Yeah.
Who say that they can, with relative accuracy, identify AI generated images and video. Now, it's a whole other question as to whether their claims of 90% accuracy are true or not, or whatever, because obviously it's in their interest to say that they can do this.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is that the social media platforms don't want to know about it, because they're happy for people to propagate all kinds of nonsense if it's going to rile people up and create engagement and keep people on the platform and keep people fighting.
Frank, just this week, the royal family have been engaged in putting out some fake, doctored images and so on. So everybody's at it.
Absolutely, yeah. And do you not think it would be a really positive thing for social media platforms to have, for the responsibility to be on social media platforms, to be at least flagging, look, our system thinks this is 90% likely to be AI, or there's only a 10% chance that this was developed by AI, or do you not think that there's that it's a good thing that the EU are trying to put some responsibility on the platforms to think about how they are propagating all of this content and why?
Well, you see, that's a different. There's a couple of different arguments in there. So the first thing is that particular the Reality Defender product that you spoke of. Did you? I mean, I did see the article. Did you get any insight into how they thought that they said the product might work? Did they give any details on that?
I think it's AI. It's AI looking at.
You're talking. That's my type of company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think they use AI to assess vast amounts of genuine video and genuine photographs, and assess as much synthetic material as possible, and then they're using what's real as a baseline for what are the significant differences between something that is real versus something that is not, and then coming up with a percentage like 90% likely to be synthetic versus real.
It's going through the Justo sniff test here at the moment. That sounds like a really good idea to me. I think that would work, because I think when I saw this story first, I was going, there's no way that you can tell a really good AI generated image from a non-AI generated image. And there's some people talking about, we have to put watermarks on them, and then there's other people talking about, maybe we'll have a register with, the hash values of all the AI generated content, and you could do a lookup. None of those are going to work technically. There's easy ways around each of those.
Sure.
But if you've got an AI that is looking at an image or a video, I think that there will be far more subtle things that even a human eye couldn't spot, to do with the color gradients, to do with the movements. And as I said, they would be so subtle, because when you think about it, we're the training, it's been trained to fool us, to make it look real. But the AI will be able to look deeper into that picture or deeper into the video, and will pick up far more. So did you hear about this thing, right? Far more subtle signs of whether a thing is real or not. I'll give you an example, right? There was a very scared, they don't even know how this worked yet. Or the last I saw of it, they didn't, where they had x-rays of people, right? And they would show the x-rays to people. And what they wanted to do was, obviously they wanted to figure out if the person had some sort of a disease or other thing, right? But the researchers who were doing it decided to ask the AI, can you tell us what race a particular person is from the x-ray? And it was really good, like 95% it was able to tell. And that was kind of interesting, that, is there a slight difference between the bone structure? So what they started to do was they started to pixelate the image. So they made it less defined, and they fed them back into the AI and said, can you tell us the race of this particular skeleton? Again, perfect, really good. So then they continued to pixelate the image, right, to such an extent that it didn't even look like a skeleton anymore, right? It was just a sort of a jumbled up image, and it was still pretty good. And they obviously was picking up on some feature of the image that was unobvious to a human eye. And actually, the researchers at the end, we don't know how it's doing this, but it's clearly picking up on something. Anyway, the point being that this reality defender, when I saw it first, I'm going, no, I don't think that will work. But actually, I think it could work. I think it's a really good idea. Is it a good idea then? Your second part of your question, is it a good idea that social media platforms have to flag up, that this is a doctored image? Yes. Especially when it comes to elections. I think that will be a very valuable thing. I don't think you could argue against that.
Yeah.
Should you mandate it? Should you do anything more than it? No, I think, no, I think, that's we're coming back to personal responsibility, right? So if I see an image, one of the things when you grow up nowadays is you're going to have to be able to tell whether an image is doctored or AI or not. And so if you see an image and it doesn't say this is 90% probably true, well, then you should probably disregard it. And a bit of natural deselection will happen if you don't.
Yes. But do you not? So I guess my argument would be like, I don't think the platforms are going to do this unless things like EU regulations insist that they do it, because they don't want to do it because they're quite happy for us to believe that that's Donald Trump being arrested on the streets of wherever. They're delighted to stir up that engagement.
That's Kate Middleton with 6 fingers, all of which are crossed. I think what I think is happening right now, though, is that the regulation, that will be a fine regulation. That's a regulation of social media, not really a regulation of AI. I wouldn't have any issue with that at all, because social media has been around for 10 years. We have studies which clearly show, I think social media is more likely to kill us all far long before AI does. I've seen it myself with children, where it has a terribly mental destructive effect on young people's minds. So to do that, totally fine. Nothing to do with regulating AI. We don't even know what the dangers are, if any, to do with AI. So I think it's okay. But tell me, there was a nice story about Walmart this week and how they're putting AI to a good use. Maybe you could tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I thought that was fascinating, because in a way it's such a simple implementation. In their app, they have implemented a chatbot where it'll basically just help you shop. So simple, and yet I think the reason I think this is genius is because you can go in, you can say, okay, my dad's birthday is coming up. He's interested in stamp collecting and bird watching, and the chatbot can go away and come back and say, look, here's 5 products that might make great gifts for your dad. Brilliant. The reason I love it as well is because I know you and I have talked about some implementations of chatbots for companies before, and I've been a little bit kind of skeptical. But the reason I love this is because the user can assess the output. I can look at it and go, well, this list is rubbish for my dad. Or I can look at it and go, oh, number 3, he's going to love number 3. That's a brilliant idea. So, as opposed to, say, the recent case where a guy was traveling for a funeral and was trying to figure out how he would get a special rate for the bereaved, and the chatbot said, oh yeah, just buy the ticket, you'll get reimbursed, which turned out to be complete rubbish. And the airline were like, no, we're not giving you the money back. That's not how it works. Yeah. So in that instance, the user was not in a position to assess the output. So that's why I love this Walmart idea. And because as a marketer, I'm like, wow, such a simple idea. Could small companies not do this? Could small companies not just give their catalog to an LLM and have on their site a little chat box that pops up and says, can I help you shop? What do you think?
Absolutely. I think it's a brilliant idea, right? I really, really like this. And I think we need to talk about institutional delay and stuff like that. But just on this idea first, if you go back to the sometimes old things come back into fashion again because of new technologies. And, if you think in our grandparents' time, there was a local co-op or a local mart or something like that, and people would go down there, they'd put their produce there. You think of Amish people in, Pennsylvania, You know, you've got your Amish store, everybody goes and they put their stuff there. You go down to your local market, you buy the produce. It's locally produced. It's good for the environment. It's probably being produced in a very ethical way, you know, all that sort of stuff. And what it seems to me is Walmart are obviously a behemoth of a company, but this exactly the same technology could be used to enable local producers. So if you have a co-op, a local co-op of people, and they just let the AI know what products it is that's for sale this week, and you know, you go along and say, here, look, can you do my shopping for the week, please? Here's a photo of what's in my fridge. And it goes, sure. And it goes to the local producers. Well, the local producer has won because it's cut out the middleman, which is Walmart. It's direct from producer to consumer. You've got stuff that's you know, sustainably produced in the local area, and it's good for the environment because you know all the produce is within 20 miles. So that's all good. I love that idea. But I think what's more interesting about this, and a couple of other things that have happened this week, is you know, you're worried that it's going too fast, and I'm worried that it's not going fast enough. And the truth is that inertia is going to make sure that things don't go too fast. And I think what we're finding this week is that this technology has been around for a year, but really now we're starting to see the ideas, you know, the good ideas like this are starting to come to the fore. And there was another one that we'll talk about in a second. And so, I mean, I would put it like this, right? This is why I think we can't go fast enough, right? So last week we talked about actors, the end of actors, right? And that was it. Actors were going to be all out of a job. This year we had Devlin by Cognition had been released, and you know, we can joke and say, well, that's it. All developers are going to be out of a job, you know, pretty soon, which isn't true, but you know, we can see that it's going to happen in the future. And you know, it's almost like that poem where first they came for the poets and nobody said anything. Then you know, it's a bit like that. It's one thing after another, right? And what happens is if this goes on and it's all spread out, so you say, oh, we're going to do this very slowly because Frank's frightened that, you know, things are happening too quickly, right? What's going to happen is you're going to create division.
Those are the types of conversations that happen at the highest level of the EU Commission, for example. Yeah.
That's right. That's why they brought in the law. And so what happens is that creates divisions in society because not everybody's going to lose their job at the same time. So there's going to be haves and there's going to be have-nots, right? And that's going to create, you know, a growing group of people who are disgruntled. And that's a problem. Whereas if AGI was invented tomorrow and everybody knew AGI has been invented, right? Well, then we all know that we're out of a job, right? So I'm no better than you are. We're all in the same boat. But institutional inertia is going to make sure that we all don't lose our jobs straight away, right? It's still going to take 3, 4, maybe 5 years for everybody, but you all know what's coming, right? There's no avoiding it. And that's why it's better to have just get it out there. Let's, you know, rip the cord, pull off the bandage, just let's do this thing. And I think we're nearly there.
That is, I don't even know what to say. So we're headed towards a career apocalypse. So we should just do it now, get it over with, and maybe not give governments and corporations the time to figure out how they're going to ensure that you and I can afford our groceries. Or, you know, we'll be chatting to the AI bot saying, could you put together a meal from those local producers for me? And the AI will say, well, I certainly can, but you can't afford to buy any of it. So is there any point, buddy?
But look, everything will be free anyway, Frank. I mean, at that point, or you know, there's a whole argument about economics. But my real point,
now you're talking. I'm well up for that. But like the problem is, if we speed up into the career apocalypse, I don't think we will have time to ensure that everything will be free. I think we will only have enough time to make sure that Elon Musk and Sam Altman and whoever else have enough time to kind of go, yeah, we've got money, we're okay. Apart from that, does it really matter?
There's no point in them having money, you know, on their own because, you know, they won't be able to spend it on anything. But I don't think that's how it'll happen.
That's the point. That's what I'm saying about going too fast, is that they just won't have the time to figure out the alternative.
My point to see is that it's impossible to go too fast because the technology, if you've got to think of it, there's two tracks to this, right? You've got a technology track and you've got then a societal track. So the technology track can shoot ahead and it can go to AGI and ASI and beyond it. But nothing will change, right? If AGI was invented tomorrow, you know, you'd still get up and go to work, right? And it's going to take a couple of years for society to catch up. And this week has been kind of one of those weeks, right? We've launched rockets into space that are, nearly as big as the Empire State Building. We've got a thing which has been developed, which can write code, like an entire project from a single prompt. We have a robot from Figure, so that when you go to your Walmart to get your AI suggested products, the robot is going to hand you your apple and your orange.
How did that happen so quickly? I mean, we talked about Figure, was it last week or the week before? It was only a week or two ago that we were like, oh, look at this, Figure are teaming up with OpenAI. And then suddenly we have this insane video. I want to ask you about that video, actually. So in that video, the robot, when he's asked for something, yeah, exactly. He does. He says things like, I'll give you this apple. Or, there's all these there's these ums and ahs and falters. Do you know why that's happening? Because I looked at it and I thought, okay, either this is built in to make it seem more human, which is insanely clever, or it's not built in and it's kind of a learned behavior, and that's terrifying.
I'll tell you exactly what's going on, Frank. Calm down. Everything's fine. So here's what's going on, right? So about 9 months ago, when all of this was getting going and we were doing it, I decided to try and write an app called Alfred, which was very imaginatively called Alfred because it was going to be like Batman's butler, except you could have it.
I like it.
Everybody could have it, right? And whenever somebody would ring you and say, here, can I talk to Frank, please? And I had a nice old English man. Oh, hello. I'm Alfred, Frank's butler. I'm afraid Frank's not available at the moment. Right. So that was what it was going to be. And it would send you a message, or you could set up meetings and whatever. And I dropped the idea because it became obvious to me that this was going to be commoditized. Google and OpenAI, they're going to release it. Right. There's no point. Apple are going to release it. There's no market there.
Right.
So one of the technical challenges in developing that is latency, right? So when I say something to you as a human, right? Well, certainly for me, right? When you start to talk, your first 3 words go in, and I'm already starting to formulate the answer. And by the time you finish talking, I've sort of got the start of my answer ready for you, and I'll give you that, and then I'll sort of make it up as I go along, like most things, right? But for the Figure robot, the way that those systems tend to work is you have to speak until there's a gap. And then it knows when there's a gap, right, that you've stopped speaking. And so what it does is it takes all of that text and sends it off, right, which is sound, right? And it'll send it off to a text-to-speech, speech-to-text translator. And it turns that sound into words. Those words then have to be fed into the LLM. Then the LLM has to decide on the response and has to send that back to the text-to-speech. And then it has to turn those words back into sound in order for it to talk back to you. And that was the biggest technical challenge I had for Alfred, because at the time, even just to get a response from the LLM could take 5 seconds. Now nowadays it's sub-second, right? It can be quick. But the text to speech, the speech to text, there's maybe a 1/10 of a second in each of those. And then you have a second or two in the deciding what to say. A really obvious technical solution, and I'm quite sure what's happened here is you make it go, okay, and then it starts to talk. It's totally a delay mechanism just to buy some time in order for it to process the information that's been sent.
It seems to happen like mid-sentence, though. So is it changing? Is it changing direction? So I know, for example, if you use ChatGPT, every now and then, ChatGPT will start an answer for you and then delete it and just start again. So
yeah.
Is the M the verbal equivalent of that? Do you think?
Of a change of direction? I think it could be, because also in the background, and let's talk about a little bit about this because it's related, right? So Cognition released this thing called Devon, right, which was this developer, right? You could type in a prompt and it would develop a whole project for you, right? So and the same with Figure. So what actually happens in the background is when you're typing, it's a one over and back, right? One message over, one message back, one message over, one message back. But all of those products, what they'll do is they'll fire off 20 or 30 messages at the same time. And then, they'll get 20 or 30 responses, and it might pick the first one. And then it might go, when it's waiting and deciding what the second response is to give to you. And it'll put together 2 or 3 of those responses. So I'm thinking in figure, that's what's going on there.
Right.
And in Devon, if you just want to talk about that for a second, right? In Devon, then people were talking about, I have to talk to you about this particular thing, right? So people were saying, oh, it's not that cheap and it's not that fast and it's not that good, right? Because it does a lot of that. It uses GPT-4 and it sends off hundreds of requests. And so it costs maybe $100 an hour in API costs just for it to develop software.
Right.
And people are saying, oh, sure, for God's sake, $100 an hour. Software developers don't get paid $100 an hour. And, what they produce is better than that. So wine, Frank, it's all about wine.
Okay.
Let me tell you about wine. So Orley, there was a guy called Orley. I'm trying to remember his second name, right? There was a guy called Orley. He was an American economist, and he loved wine, Bordeaux wine in particular, in the 80s. And so he studied it. And what he did was he came up with a formula. So how they know if a wine is a good wine or a bad wine, because it takes years for it to mature in casks, is there were French wine tasters. And as soon as the wine was casked, they would taste it and they'd say, oh, it's a good year, it's a bad year, depending on their nose, they would smell it. And 10 years later, you'd find out. And this guy, Orley, came along and he said, well, hold on a second, I've got a formula. And if I calculate, the numbers of days of sunshine multiplied by if it's on the south slopes, multiplied by how many days of rain you've had, blah, blah, I can actually predict exactly using this formula how good the wine is going to be.
Right.
And the whole French industry was, oh, you cannot replace a French nose with a mere formula. It's taking generations of breeding to get this nose to be perfect in every way. How dare you? Total cope, right? It was professional pride was what was stopping them from realizing that he was right. And it took them 10 years to prove it, right? Because you had to wait for the wine to mature. And so all of these people that said, oh, it's, launching hundreds of GPT-4 API requests and it's costing $100 an hour, cope. It's professional pride. In 2 years' time, the costs of an API request will have gone down probably 10 times. And it'll have got 10 times faster. And the code that they write will be 10 times bigger. And so while it's not going to replace a developer, which is what I do and what I love, right? It's not going to replace a developer today. In 2 years, it might do.
Sure.
And, you were put out of a job last week. I've been put out of a job this week.
Yeah. Who are we going to put out of the job next week? We'll find out. We'll find out next Friday, same time. Which is a beautiful way to bring this to a close. We're literally just at time. I can't believe how quickly this time goes. That was fascinating for me. I hope anyone who's listening has found it as fascinating. I feel like this was definitely another Frighten Frank Friday with your hurrying of the career apocalypse. But I'm looking forward to seeing what we chat about next week.
Frank, let's have a friendly bet. Do you think it's possible that in the next 7 days we could have more things that happened than in the last 7 days?
Wow. I do. Yeah.
And you know what that is? Because I do too, right? And if we don't, right, because you might have a week that's a quiet week. Yeah. That's possible. But as the technology gets better and it helps, by the way, there was another thing that happened this week, which we didn't talk about. And that was scientists were trying to make a new battery. And they had 38 million possible materials, I think it was. AI narrowed it down to 28. Now they just have to test 28 and, right, they'll make a new battery. And so my point being that new scientific discovery and new things will happen faster and faster as time moves on and the technology gets better. So this week, like both of us, I think, had our white knuckle rise, like, wow.
Yeah.
But that's likely to be our life from now on. Like next week will be the same, I think, and the week after will be the same. And next year, like as we started this conversation, in an entire decade in the 80s, you might have had 2 or 3 things that blew your mind. And we're now entering a period where possibly every single week you're going to see something that's going to make you go, wow, never thought you'd see that, it's just incredible.
It is incredible. It is. Yeah. Yeah, it is incredible. And
I don't know. The bunker.
I may have to start just filtering some of it out at this point.
Frank, this has been a great week. A pleasure as always.
Excellent. Yeah, great chatting to you. And we'll be back at the same time next week. Excellent. Cheers, Justin.
See ya. Bye.